The president of NATO's second-largest military said, "Just as we entered Libya and Karabakh, we can enter Israel. There is no reason not to do it. 500,000 troops, 50 American nuclear warheads on Turkish soil." NATO was built for external threats. Nobody wrote the paragraph for when a member is the threat. What does the most powerful alliance in history do when it has no plan and no way to remove the problem? At 22:14 into a live national broadcast on April 12, 2026, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan addressed delegates and senior officers in Istanbul with a sentence that reverberated through every diplomatic channel. He said, "Just as we entered Karabakh and Libya, we can enter Israel today. There is no reason not to do it." The statement, confirmed by official Turkish transcripts and independently verified by Tayit.org, was delivered from the stage of the Ataturk Cultural Center and instantly circulated by state media. Erdogan's reference to Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh was not a rhetorical flourish. In both conflicts, Turkish drones and advisors had altered the outcome, first in the deserts of North Africa, then in the mountains of the South Caucasus. The message was unmistakable. Turkey possesses the means and the will to project force beyond its borders if it chooses. Erdogan did not stop with military precedent. He invoked alleged Pakistani mediation, telling the audience that Ankara's restraint was not due to NATO obligations, but to diplomatic intervention from Islamabad. This claim, echoed by Turkish state outlets but unconfirmed by any official Pakistani source, was left to stand as a signal that Turkey's calculus was independent of alliance constraints. The institutional contradiction sharpened with each word. NATO's founding treaty, drafted in 1949 to deter external Soviet aggression, contains no provision for disciplining a member that threatens a partner of another ally. Article 5, the alliance's core clause, binds all members to collective defense if one is attacked. Article 13 allows only for voluntary withdrawal, not expulsion. The system's design assumes permanent good faith among its members, a premise now exposed as a structural vulnerability. Complicating this reality, roughly 50 United States B-61 nuclear bombs remain stationed at Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey, under a dual-key arrangement that requires both American and Turkish assent for use or removal. The presence of these warheads on the soil of a member openly threatening a United States ally is not a theoretical risk, but a live contradiction at the heart of the alliance. The blueprint, for all its detail, never included a paragraph for when the threat comes from within. Turkey enters the current crisis with hard numbers that place it among the world's major armed powers. The 2026 Global Firepower Assessment lists approximately 350,000 active duty personnel in the Turkish armed forces, with an arsenal including over 2,400 main battle tanks and just under 250 combat aircraft. These figures are not speculative. They are drawn from open-source audits and regularly cited in international defense analyses. The Turkish army fields a mix of Leopard 2 variants and the indigenous Altay main battle tank, while its Air Force operates legacy F-16 aircraft, modernized F-4 aircraft, and is scheduled to incorporate Eurofighter-class airframes under the KAAN program. Turkey's position in the International Institute for Strategic Studies 2026 rankings is 14th globally in manpower and 11th in combined air and ground firepower. The country's UAV program is equally consequential, with over 130 operational drones in service and a reputation as the world's fourth largest exporter of unmanned systems. The Bayraktar TB2 alone has been exported in quantities exceeding 500 units, with proven records in at least 3 recent conflicts. Against this backdrop, President Erdogan's invocation of Libya and Karabakh is not rhetorical. In both theaters, Turkish drones and advisors produced measurable battlefield outcomes. In Nagorno-Karabakh, TB2s were credited with eliminating over 100 targets, including advanced air defense systems. In Libya, Turkish-operated drones neutralized dozens of command sites and armored columns. These precedents establish a credible playbook for force projection. However, the AEI's 2025 assessment introduces a structural caveat. Turkey's last conventional war against a peer was in Cyprus in 1974. Since then, its engagements have been limited to asymmetrical or low-intensity conflicts. NATO's own readiness studies cite a 12% increase in Turkey's training degradation index since 2018, raising questions about actual preparedness for high-intensity warfare. On the diplomatic front, Erdogan's claim of Pakistani mediation remains uncorroborated. While Turkish state media repeated the assertion, no official Pakistani government statement confirms any intervention. Public records from Islamabad, including Ministry of Foreign Affairs briefings, contain only generic calls for peaceful resolution, not direct involvement between Ankara and Tel Aviv. This detail is not trivial. It underscores that Turkey's calculus is being presented as autonomous, not dictated by alliance discipline or external restraint. The threat, therefore, is anchored in both capacity and intention, leaving little room for misinterpretation about the seriousness of the scenario. In the autumn of 2020, the South Caucasus became a proving ground for the next era of military technology. Azerbaijan's campaign to retake Nagorno-Karabakh did not hinge on massed armor or deep penetration air raids. Instead, it was defined by the relentless tempo and precision of Turkish-supplied Bayraktar TB2 drones. Over a span of 6 weeks, open-source battle damage assessments attributed the neutralization of more than 100 Armenian targets to TB2 sorties, including artillery emplacements, mobile radar units, logistics hubs, and most consequentially, advanced surface-to-air missile batteries. Among the destroyed assets was a Russian-built S-300 system, a platform designed to repel high-end aerial threats, but rendered vulnerable by the drone's persistent surveillance and standoff munitions. The operational rhythm was as notable as the results. Analysis of flight logs and video releases from the Turkish Ministry of Defense indicates an average deployment of 12 TB2s per day during the conflict's high-intensity phase. These unmanned systems loitered for hours, feeding real-time targeting data to command centers and executing strikes with minimal exposure. The loss rate for TB2s remained remarkably low, 4 confirmed losses yielding an attrition rate near 3%. This figure stands in contrast to historical manned aircraft losses in similar air defense environments and underscores the cost-effectiveness of the platform. The TB2's success in Karabakh was not simply a matter of technological novelty. Its low radar cross-section, slow flight profile, and ability to operate in coordinated waves allowed it to bypass or saturate legacy Soviet-designed air defense networks. The system's endurance, up to 24 hours on a single mission, enabled continuous pressure on fixed and mobile targets alike. The result was a systematic dismantling of the opponent's integrated air defense, opening corridors for ground advances and shifting the operational balance without the need for massed air power. This campaign established a template, precision-guided, persistent, and scalable drone operations capable of neutralizing conventional defenses at a fraction of the cost of traditional assets. The precedent set in Karabakh was not hypothetical. It provided a data-rich demonstration of how a mid-tier military, equipped with modern drones, could impose tempo and destruction on a peer's static defenses. The Turkish model, exported and iterated, became a reference point for subsequent conflicts and a central pillar in Ankara's own strategic messaging. Yet, as the American Enterprise Institute's 2025 review cautioned, battlefield dominance over legacy systems does not guarantee performance against a fully modernized, multi-layer adversary. The Karabakh campaign showcased the lethality of the TB2 against outdated or poorly networked air defenses. Whether this playbook would survive contact with a peer equipped with integrated, adaptive counter-UAV measures remains an open question. The evidence from the South Caucasus is clear. The architecture of warfare has shifted, and the Turkish approach is now embedded in the alliance's strategic calculus, for better or worse. In Libya, the drone war unfolded not as a demonstration, but as a test of concept under live fire conditions. Turkish-supplied Bayraktar TB2s, operating in support of the UN-backed Government of National Accord, neutralized 68 ground targets from 2019 to 2020. Open-source analysis confirms a kill ratio of 1 TB2 lost per 5 targets destroyed, with no independently verified losses attributed to enemy action. The cost calculus was blunt. Each TB2 unit, priced near $5 million, delivered strike capabilities previously reserved for platforms 6 times more expensive. This arithmetic, repeated across multiple theaters, underpins the Turkish assertion that drone-enabled force projection is not aspirational but operationally proven. Yet the precedent set in Libya is not static. The next phase is already under construction. In March 2026, Bayraktar engineers conducted a controlled test of the K2 loitering munition, a system designed to operate autonomously in coordinated swarms. The demonstration involved multiple K2 drones executing a distributed strike on a moving target beyond line of sight, in a simulated GPS-denied environment. The footage, released by Bayraktar and corroborated by independent defense analysts, illustrates a shift from isolated drone sorties to algorithmically managed mass. The swarm concept is not theoretical, it is a technical trajectory that promises to saturate air defense networks through volume, persistence, and adaptive targeting. The implications for regional security are layered. Traditional air defense systems, designed for manned aircraft and ballistic threats, struggle to track and intercept dozens of small, low-signature UAVs attacking in concert. The Libyan campaign exposed these vulnerabilities in legacy Russian and French-built systems, but the swarm model anticipates an even more complex challenge. NATO's own readiness reviews cite this evolution as a destabilizing variable, noting that the cost-exchange ratio between offensive drones and defensive interceptors increasingly favors the attacker. A single Iron Dome interceptor, for example, costs upwards of $50,000 per launch. A coordinated swarm of low-cost drones can exhaust such systems through sheer numbers. However, the American Enterprise Institute 2025 critique remains in view. The AEI analysis, led by John H. Stokes and Layla Gul, argues that Turkey's record, impressive against irregular formations and outdated air defenses, may not translate against a peer equipped with layered adaptive countermeasures. The last Turkish engagement against a conventional technologically matched adversary dates to Cyprus in 1974. Since then, every operational success has occurred in environments where the opponent lacked modern electronic warfare or integrated air defense. This caveat tempers the narrative of unstoppable drone warfare with a structural warning. The playbook is proven, but only against certain types of opposition. Looking ahead, the 2026 K2 swarm test signals a future where quantity and autonomy may outpace traditional defense planning. The institutional risk is clear. As the cost and complexity gap widens, the alliance's own assumptions about deterrence and escalation control face a new kind of stress test, one built not on the old certainties of hardware parity, but on the unpredictable dynamics of networked unmanned mass. 50 B-61 gravity bombs remain housed at Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey, a number confirmed by both the Federation of American Scientists and the Nuclear Threat Initiative as of mid-2025. These warheads are not hypothetical assets. Each is subject to a dual-key protocol. The United States holds the arming codes, but Turkish authorities control the base perimeter, flight line, and all on-site logistics. No single actor can move, arm, or remove these weapons without the other's cooperation. The arrangement was engineered during the Cold War to ensure alliance unity in nuclear decision-making. Instead, it now presents the most concrete example of NATO's structural contradiction. Removal of the bombs would require weeks of overt preparation, diplomatic notification, and a visible rupture in alliance relations. Leaving them in place as the host government threatens military action against a US partner signals acquiescence to a scenario the treaty never anticipated. The Incirlik facility itself is a NATO base by design, but it operates under Turkish legal jurisdiction. In 2022, Ankara denied Washington's request to use Incirlik for operations against Iran, underscoring the limits of American leverage. There is no parliamentary mechanism in Turkey for unilateral US control once the bombs are on Turkish soil. The presence of these warheads on the territory of a member openly threatening a US ally is not a theoretical risk. It is a live paradox at the heart of the alliance. The North Atlantic Treaty Article 5, crafted to deter external aggression, offers no guidance for a scenario where the threat vector runs from one member state to the interests of another. Article 13, the only exit clause, allows for voluntary withdrawal after a year's notice, never for expulsion. The system, by design, has no firewall for internal combustion. The Incirlik stockpile is the material proof of a missing paragraph in the Alliance blueprint. Article 5, the cornerstone of NATO's collective defense, was drafted for a world where threats came from outside the alliance. Its language is precise: an armed attack against one member is an attack against all. Yet the clause contains no guidance for a scenario in which a member initiates aggression and is then struck in retaliation. The only time Article 5 has been invoked was in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, when the alliance responded to clear external violence against the United States. Every other crisis, be it Turkish incursions in Syria, Russian cyber operations against the Baltics, or internal disputes, has stopped short of triggering the mutual defense mechanism. This omission is not a technicality. If Turkey were to launch military action against Israel, and Israel responded with force on Turkish territory, the alliance would confront a legal and political dead end. The treaty does not distinguish between a defensive counterstrike and an unprovoked attack by a member. The text offers no protocol for determining fault, no arbitration process, no clause enabling the Council to suspend collective defense for a member that acts as aggressor. The system, built on the presumption of permanent solidarity, is silent when solidarity itself fractures. Internal records from the North Atlantic Council show that even the 2001 precedent, invoked only after consensus around an unmistakable external attack, required days of debate and legal consultation. In the present case, the ambiguity is deeper. Any attempt to invoke Article 5 on behalf of Turkey after a retaliatory strike by Israel would force the alliance to defend a member whose own actions triggered the crisis. The result is paralysis, not unity. The institutional blueprint, for all its precision, never accounted for a collision of obligations when the threat vector runs through its own ranks. Article 13 of the North Atlantic Treaty stands as a procedural cul-de-sac. Its language is spare: any party may withdraw after a year's notice, provided financial obligations are settled. Nowhere does the text permit expulsion, suspension, or forced removal, not even in the event of gross misconduct or open defiance. The design assumes that members will either comply or leave of their own accord. In practice, this means that even as a member acts contrary to alliance interests, the formal machinery grinds to a halt at the threshold of discipline. The North Atlantic Council, NATO's highest decision-making body, operates on consensus. Every measure, be it censure, operational exclusion, or the rare invocation of Article 4 consultations, depends on the assent of all members, including the one under scrutiny. The 2021 S-400 episode illustrates the limits of these mechanisms. Turkey's purchase of the Russian air defense system triggered United States sanctions under the Countering America's Adversaries through Sanctions Act and led to its removal from the F-35 fighter program. Yet, despite the breach of interoperability and the security risks flagged by NATO's own Air Command, the alliance itself could only issue statements, restrict Turkish participation in exercises, and rely on bilateral penalties. No formal process for suspension or expulsion was even attempted. The unanimity requirement of Article 13 ensures that any member, including the one at odds with alliance norms, holds an effective veto over its own discipline. The result is a system where the tools for enforcement stop at the door, leaving the alliance to navigate contradiction by political improvisation rather than institutional design. Consensus, in theory, is NATO's ultimate safeguard, a tool designed to keep the alliance unified, not paralyzed. Yet the record of the past 4 years reveals how easily this principle can be weaponized by a single member. The most glaring illustration came during Sweden's accession process. Turkey's veto, first exercised in October 2022 and only lifted in March 2024, left Sweden in strategic limbo for nearly 18 months. No override existed, the will of 30 members bent to the objection of 1. The accession protocol, signed and ratified by every other ally, remained inert until Ankara's demands were met through direct negotiation, not institutional remedy. The alliance's own summit minutes from January 2023 described the impasse as a test of political unity, but the mechanism itself allowed no path forward except capitulation or indefinite delay. The pattern repeated itself, less visibly, but just as consequentially, in the missile incident of March 2026. When Iranian short-range missiles briefly crossed into Turkish airspace, both Ankara and the NATO Secretary-General publicly dismissed the possibility of invoking Article 5. Instead, the alliance defaulted to Article 4 consultations, a process that shares information but commits to nothing. The official communiqué, released after 3 days of internal debate, framed the incursion as a regional security concern, sidestepping the mutual defense clause entirely. These episodes expose the operational reality, the consensus model, when confronted with internal dissent or ambiguous threats, delivers paralysis rather than action. The result is a credibility gap that grows wider with each unresolved crisis, eroding the alliance's deterrent value not through external defeat, but through the slow corrosion of its own decision-making machinery. The blueprint was written for external threats, not for a member invoking Libya and Karabakh as precedent. There is no reason not to do it. 50 United States nuclear warheads remain at Incirlik, while Article 5 and Article 13 collide in silence. The paradox is structural. NATO's credibility now rests on a clause that never imagined this wall missing. The threat is not the adversary outside, but the design flaw within.